Dear students, in this session, you are going to learn about modernization and globalization. Students, do you know what is meant by modernization or globalization? After this session, you will have a clear picture about both these topics. Let me ask you a question. Why is it important to learn modernization and globalization? Well, India is a very vast country. India is rich in its culture and tradition. Over the past few decades, India has emerged into a new India, or we can say a modernized India. This had both good effect and adverse effect. Modernization is just the adoption of modern ways of life. Globalization is a vast topic to be learned. It is a big process and there is no end to this process. It is mainly focused on global interconnectedness. It has many cultural, environmental and political processes. India had been a witness of both modernization and globalization. It was happening in India at the same pace. So students, let us now learn together about the process of modernization and globalization in India. This short video will guide you to detailed process of modernization and globalization. Modernization. Can you tell me what do you mean by the term modern or modernization? Being modern means keeping pace with the times and changing needs, right? Modernizing India means getting rid of its image of caste-ridden, poverty-afflicted and illiteracy and catapulting it to the heights on par with the development and enlightened countries of the world. A nation cannot proceed on the path of development without discarding her useless baggage of conservatism, superstitious beliefs and mindless rituals. The Asian tigers, South Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong and Singapore, who were not much better off than India 50 years back, worked hard and systematically to modernize and achieve economic development. Do you know what the foremost step of a modernization was? 100% literacy for all was the foremost step towards modernization and development of these countries. All the Asian nations mentioned earlier developed their human resources by upgrading technical and higher education. The deficiency in economic capital was reduced by inviting foreign investment. Liberalization of economic reforms and easing restrictive rules were essential in bringing about the change in the economic fortunes of these countries. India lagged behind in understanding the virtues of market economy and took slow and unsure steps to realize only a limited success in bringing forth economic growth in the 1990s. Communal and caste violence frequently took place in various parts of India and prevented certain sections of society from taking collective steps for social and economical progress. Caste-based hostilities are the greatest impediments in the path of modernization of rural society in India. Most modern societies in the world have adopted small family norms and successfully achieved low population rate. Do you have any idea how much India's population during independence? India's population, which was 339 million during Indian independence, had become treble in recent years. Except for Kerala and other South Indian states, most of the states in India have not been able to reduce birth rate to the desired level. Elimination of gender bias and establishing of equality of sexes are absolutely necessary for modernizing India. Heavy investments are required for setting up schools to educate girl students and help them claim their rightful place in society. Modernization of society is not possible if its economy remains backward. Immediate steps must be taken to boost the economy by inviting foreign investors to put their money in education, healthcare and environment protection. Can government alone bring about modernization or prosperity in Indian society? No. Experience of countries such as USA and Germany shows us that non-governmental organizations, universities and professional organizations have played a significant role in bringing about people. Similar efforts have to be made to transform India into a developed nation. Impact of modernization. We shall now discuss the impact of modernization in the rural areas of India. Modernization, along with westernization, has accelerated the process of rapid social change both in the rural and the urban areas. The migration of man-force from rural to urban areas was an after effect of this social change. This migration became a continuous process affecting the lives of the people in the villages socially, economically and culturally. Urban employment came to be considered as a sign of higher social prestige. This migration led to problems like housing in the village situated near to the towns. During the process of the rise of metropolitan cities, most villages became the rural stopgaps for the city centers. Do you know, modernization in southern India also had a caste effect in the sense that Brahmins were the first to leave the villages for the towns and made full use of Western education to achieve employment in modern profession. Even in the urban areas, they were able to hold important posts which involved no manual laborers. However, the resentment against the privileges enjoyed by the Brahmins and the economic recession of the 1930s led to migration of Brahmins from the south and rural areas to the metro cities. This migration from rural to urban areas also led to flow of urban money into rural areas. This money helped the dependents to clear off loans, build houses and educate children. The urban areas became centers of national and international culture. New thoughts, ideologies and cultural exchanges were brought to the villages from the cities through modern means of communication like television, newspaper, computer, the internet and the telephone. The process of urbanization was not an isolated phenomenon. Urban jobs and other luxuries have become status symbols in the rural areas. The large-scale commercialization of agriculture was possible due to urbanization. Now let us learn about the impact of modernization on society. Modernization, as you all know, is a process of spreading the values, institutions and technical aspects of modern society. Let us take it with an example, a case study of Baiga tribe. The Baiga tribe of Madhya Pradesh was declared a tribal reserve area where the entry of non-tribal missionaries and other exploiting elements should be completely prohibited. Having a population of 1,76,934, the Baiga, one of the 6 primitive tribes of Madhya Pradesh, are mainly found in the district of Mandya, Shadol, Siddhi, Balaghat, Bilaspur and Surguja. They are one of the most backward tribes of the state, with the percentage among them being 4.51. Another interesting fact about the Baigas was that they used to practice shifting cultivation, also known as bevar in local lingo, till quite recently. But now they have been advised or rather forced to give up this practice. They have, however, been permitted to pursue bevar cultivation inside the Baiga Chak reservation, which has 50 villages. Though they have adjusted to the new method of plough cultivation, mentally they still prefer the bevar by which they used to grow 12 varieties of grain. But their cultural system has not had any noticeable change. Traditionally, the males in this community kept tangled hair, which looked like a bun. Now, a few educated people have stopped this practice. You may be surprised to know that tattooing, which is considered so hip today, was practiced way back in the year 1932 by the women folk of this tribe. The women had tattoos all over their body. This practice continues even now. The headquarters of Baiga Chak is called Charha. There is a clinic, a resident doctor, a pharmacy and a nurse. But only a few numbers of people visit the clinic when they are ill. You know, majority of them still believe in shamanistic healing to rid them of pain and suffering. They have primary, middle and secondary schools. But very few Baiga children attend the schools. The dropout rate is higher as one moves to higher classes. There are only 2 Baiga teachers in the whole region. A couple of changes were apparent in their economic life. Some of them now work as agricultural laborers with the Gond. They also take up jobs offered by the forest department like daily wage laborers for making the forest wall, in the rope making factory and in the plantations. Aspects of modernization. Now let us have a look at the aspects of modernization. The first aspect is in relation to the societies. We have seen how modernization in the tribes can be attributed to their contact with the agencies spreading the values of modernity like open networks, achievement, competition, equality, caste and class-free occupation. The missionaries also initiated modernization. We have seen how the Gujarat milk cooperatives created situations involving the local people and bringing them in contact with developed sections of the society. Do you know, in some parts of India, installation of heavy industries and setting up of urban centers was responsible for spreading modernity? The next aspect of modernization is industrialization. We have seen how in the last 4 decades there has been an increase in the mining and manufacturing industries. Forest resources have been unscrupulously exploited, eventually leading to deforestation. Most of these industries were coincidentally established in or around tribal areas because they were rich in minerals and other resources. We have seen how there was a rapid increase of urban population in Assam, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh and Orissa due to the establishment of mining and manufacturing industries. Other economic institutions were also established. For example, in Assam and South India, tea, coffee and rubber estates were formed. The tribal were deprived of their land and made to work as plantation laborers. The tribes were forcibly sent to other countries to work as laborers. For example, the Nauls who were sent to Mauritius, the Kandhar of Orissa who were taken to Mesopotamia to serve in World War I. Industrialization in the tribal areas offered new jobs. Installation of big industrial and development projects in tribal zones necessitated the displacement of the native population. The tribal suffered as a result of overexploitation of forest resources by the outsiders. The economy of the tribal population, which was to a large extent based on forest produce, became weak. Therefore, a combination of local factors and availability of new job opportunities forced the tribals to seek employment in heavy industries, plantations, construction sites, etc. The next aspect of industrialization is education. The tribals have realized the importance of modern education after having migrated to various industrial towns and being exposed to industrialization for almost 4 decades. Do you know the missionaries also played a prominent role in spreading Western education? The government is also committed to the idea that one of the factors to speedy development is education. Education promotes social mobility and increases the ability of the people to think about their possibilities. Ashram schools, especially meant for tribal children living in remote and isolated villages, have been opened up. They are residential, providing free boarding and lodging to its students. They are supposed to impart craft-based education, thus connecting learning with productive activities so that the students are sufficiently prepared to take up any of the craft-based occupations. Now let's see the fourth aspect of industrialization, the family structure. Domestic duties of the tribal children, especially the girls, were other aspects of their education. From a very young age, they are for drinking purposes and looking after the younger siblings. The children were not asked to take study seriously due to poor economic status of most tribal households. Globalization. There are many definitions for the word globalization. There is free trade and free transport of goods. It is obvious that India has undergone globalization. One of the main features that globalization provided that it has changed Indian market from being a seller's market to a consumer's market. It is so much evident to all of us that India has underwent a rapid change in economic as well as social matters. Globalization is still continuing process. Globalization mainly considers the matter of culture, not the economic part. Now let us see two definitions for globalization. The first one is globalization is a term that tries to capture the rapid social change that is occurring simultaneously across a number of dimensions, including the economy, politics, communications, and culture. This definition states that globalization is a rapid change that affects the four main and integrated dimensions of a society. Coming to the next definition, it states that globalization is where social and cultural life can no longer be seen as firmly located in particular places with clear boundaries. This definition does not confront the first definition. This definition does not imply the original concept of globalization. So let us stick with the first definition dealing with the various dimensions of Indian society. After a due course of time, some bad consequences of globalization were coming into light. Let us see the consequences one by one. First consequence is that the market economy became powerful. The private sectors became more influential. The second consequence is the introduction of MNCs and other private firms affected the life of poor people much. Since the state had withdrawn field of social welfare, the third consequence is that all the small-scale industries were closed as they couldn't compete with the MNCs. And the fourth consequence is an important one. As many works was done by machines and computers, so many people were fired from their jobs. This resulted in unemployment in many places. And the fifth consequence of globalization is women suffered a lot. The MNCs preferred male employees, so female employees were left jobless. We have seen the consequences. Now we will see brief discussion about acceptance of globalization. Actually, globalization can be regarded as capitalism in globalized form. Do you know globalization is an irreversible process? The challenge put forth is to face it. Globalization is not widely accepted. It will only accept if it brings peace, freedom, rights, security, and economic benefits to all people in the society. Nowadays, globalization have become like an unrestricted economy. The hand of globalization in the Indian economy needs to be crucial. Globalization has several trajectories, is not a homogeneous one. Globalization often appears to be a force of nature, a phenomenon without bounds or alternatives. But people's movements have shown that it is neither unalterable or inevitable. The 6 dimensions of globalization. As already learned in the earlier sections about how globalization affects the various dimensions of the society, let us now deal with it in details. Now let us learn the 6 dimensions separately. We will try to link them to the consequences that we have seen earlier. The first dimension we are going to consider is individualism versus communitarianism. It noted that the youth have become more individualistic than before. The youths of present India focuses more on individual goals rather than goals of their family or an organization. One of the reasons for this is the changing family pattern. In earlier times, every family was joint family where all the generations lived together. Nowadays, it's just nuclear family. This can be one of the reasons why youths of India have a change in mentality. The next dimension we are going to consider is the achieved versus ascribed status. Here, we will discuss whether the statuses in the Indian society changing according to people. By the entry of globalization, we can say that Indian views on caste and status have changed. The boundaries surrounding caste are changing. Nowadays, one can get a job despite what caste he belongs. Are you aware that the traditional values in India have changed a lot since globalization? Yes, there has been a tremendous change in the way of social life. The next dimension that we are going to see is specificity versus diffuseness. To explain this dimension, let's take an example. The fact that diffuseness is predominant in India is contributed to Hinduism. It is one of the reasons the youths of India hold on to their religions. The next dimension we are going to see is inner or outer direction of India. Individualism is a factor to be considered here. Youths have the feeling that they control their life more than the previous generations did. Another dimension is sequential versus synchronous. According to this dimension, it is referred that the Westerners believe that behavior of Indian customers and suppliers become closer to monochromic expectations. The last dimension we are going to see is polychronic versus monochromic. It implies that if we take case of youths in India, their attitude has changed to being self-dependent, individualistic, belonging to global culture. Indian culture has westernized and still being westernized. One thing we mustn't forget that we have also embraced a lot of Eastern values too. Globalization had effect in various functional units of the Indian society. We have learned about it in the 6 dimensions. The analysis about these dimensions showed us that the evolved Indian culture has become particularistic, diffuse, communitarians, ascribed status and has a synchronous perception of time. Globalization has resulted in modern, urbanized Indians, those have rich traditional values. Even though the effect of modernization and globalization is more, we embrace our tradition and culture. I hope you all have got a fairly good idea about modernization. We have seen how developed nations like Japan have influenced India to take broad steps towards modernization. I am sure all of you have understood the impact of modernization on Indian society and how it transformed India. The benefits of modernization and development are equally distributed. It should be visible in all institutions of society. In the second half of the session, we did deal with globalization. We also outlined the features of globalization. We also learned the consequences of globalization in Indian society. The last section, we saw the 6 dimensions of globalization, how globalization operated successfully in these dimensions. Finally, we can conclude that modernization and globalization has brought a favorable change in the Indian society without altering its basic social and cultural ethos. Hope this session has brought to you a very clear picture about modernization and globalization. Hope you've had an interesting session. Thank you.